The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or beliefs of Marshall University, Marshall University Libraries, the Department of English, the College of Liberal Arts, Marshall University Film Studies, or HerdCon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of HerdCon Book Chats. I am Cody Lumpkin, and with me, as always, is my co-host Meghan Sexton Harness. And we have a special guest today for this, Dr. Jill Trefts. She is a scholar in 19th century British literature, an award-winning teacher, won the Reynolds Prize here at Marshall, and is a big fan of the book that we'll be talking about today, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And also, just a fair warning here, I am her husband. So I just thought this is a very knowledgeable person we could find about talking about today's book, A Christmas Carol, since this should be shown during the Christmas season. And also this is a part of our kind of focus currently in a series of podcasts looking at short books. And certainly Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol is a short book by our standards.
Especially for Dickens.
Yeah, by our standards and by Dickens' standards. So I just, Jill, you had a really wonderful introduction to Dickens that I just thought we just need that context.
All right. So born in 1812, Dickens' father was a clerk in the Royal Navy Pay Office, which is kind of a middle-class job, but not upper middle class at all. Charles was the second of his parents' 8 children. The Dickens family spent much of Dickens' youth in the country in Kent, although they moved around a little bit. He was born in Hampshire, spent some time in London, and he was able to get some education. Charles was able to get some education until financial disaster struck when he was about 12. His father was sent to debtor's prison, which is what happens when you can't pay your debts in 19th century England, as was typical for the times. His wife, Charles's mother, and the younger siblings went to prison with him. Charles himself was pulled out of school and went to work in a boot blacking factory. One of his biographers, Claire Tomlin, who I'll talk a little bit about, I'll mention her a lot. She said that he was pasting labels onto the bottles of boot black. He worked in that factory for about a year. His father eventually was able to get out of debtor's prison, in part because his grandmother died and left him money. Or Charles's grandmother died and left him money. Charles Dickens was eventually able to return to school and complete his education, but he never forgot the shame and the misery of that year he spent as a child laborer, and it informed all of his adult fiction. Dickens, like so many of the beloved authors and artists of the past, can best be described as complicated. On the one hand, he was deeply concerned with the situation of the poor, sometimes personally intervening in cases where he was able to make a difference. There are stories about him intervening in legal cases. He opened a house for what were called fallen women, which is to say girls who maybe got pregnant out of wedlock or who were sex workers. On the other hand, he is now somewhat notorious for his long-standing affair with the actress Ellen Ternan, who he met when she was 18 and he was 45, and also married. He left his wife Catherine for her, taking most of their 10 children with him. And this was legal at the time. Women had very few rights to their children, but it's still kind of a terrible thing to do. Dickens did support Catherine after their separation, but his cruelty to her is fairly legendary now. I mean, and to be fair, it was mostly psychological cruelty. He wasn't like physically abusive. But biographer Claire Tomlin says of 1858 that readers, quote, might want to avert your eyes from a good deal of what happened in the following year. Among some of the stories included forcing Catherine to call on the Turnins when she knew he was courting Ellen, even though, he's married to Catherine. There's a story that there was a piece of jewelry delivered to their house that was actually for Ellen Ternan, and Catherine was forced to deliver it herself. So, and supposedly on her deathbed, Catherine said something to the effect of, "Publish my letters so they'll know he loved me once." Anyway, despite the less savory aspects of his personal life, Dickens was a beloved public figure. He was the author of 15 massive novels, several novellas, including A Christmas Carol. Most of the novellas are actually Christmas stories. Many short stories. There's a handful of plays, some nonfiction works, and a variety of essays and articles because he started off as a journalist. As most people know, the majority of Dickens's novels were written and published serially, usually monthly, sometimes weekly, over a period of about a year or more. His career as a novelist begins with the Pickwick Papers in 1836 and ends in 1870 with his death, leaving the unfinished novel The Mystery of Edwin Drood. And it is a rather maddening novel since the mystery gets going and then Dickens dies and the book is not finished. Aside from A Christmas Carol, his best-known works include Oliver Twist, which was 1838, David Copperfield in 1850, and of course, Great Expectations in 1861. Do you want me to give the background of it?
Yeah.
So, as for A Christmas Carol, the story of him writing A Christmas Carol is actually quite charming. He wrote it in just 6 weeks, started it in October, was finished and published in December. He composed much of it while wandering around London. In his account of the composition, he told his Boston friend Felton that he had composed it in his head, weeping and laughing and weeping again as he walked about, quote, the black streets of London, 15 and 20 miles, many a night when all the sober folks had gone to bed, unquote. So the book was published on December 19th, 1843, and it sold 6,000 copies in the few days left before Christmas. Dickens had requested the book be published with fine-colored binding and end papers with gold lettering on the front and spine. Despite this, he insisted the book only be sold for 5 shillings. So he made it actually quite affordable for people. And however, despite the popularity of the book, which it ran through 7 editions by May of 1844, which is a lot in just 5 months, the book didn't really make any money because all of the money had gone into the printing and advertising. Despite its disappointing financial returns, A Christmas Carol was an absolute landmark in Dickens's career. It sold over 2 million copies in the U.S. in its first 100 years, according to Claire Tomlin. It remains his best-selling book in the U.S. And this is what Tomlin has to say about it. The book went straight to the heart of the public and has remained lodged there ever since, with its mixture of horror, despair, hope, and warmth. Its message, a Christian message, that even the worst of sinners may repent and become a good man, and its insistence that good cheer, food and drink shared, gifts and even dancing, are not merely frivolous pleasures, but basic expressions of love and mutual support among all human beings. And anytime I've quoted from Tomlin, it's from her biography, Charles Dickens. Although it is not precisely true that Dickens invented Christmas, like Christmas as we celebrate it now, although he did have a significant impact, the book has had a sort of tremendous impact on how we imagine and think about Christmas. A historian of Christmas, Neil Armstrong, not that one, argues that its most important innovation is that it transferred the Christmas of the literary imagination from the English countryside to the modern urban world, because basically prior to A Christmas Carol, English Christmas stories were usually set at the English country house in the English countryside, and Dickens is like, no, we're going to set it in London amid the hustle and bustle of urban life.
So, yeah, thank you for that lovely context and introduction. And so I was kind of thinking about, we're looking at this story there. This is where the Christmas Carol story comes from. Obviously, this is the origins of it. But I was kind of interested in both of your takes of what was, it's something that has morphed and been translated as famous stage play, various TV and movie versions, and kind of like how you all came to experience this classic story.
Talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but growing up, my mom had like an illustrated book full of Disney stories, and one of those stories was a Mickey's Christmas Carol, maybe. And it wouldn't matter that it wasn't Christmas. I've always liked ghost stories and spooky stuff, so it didn't even occur to me that you should only read this around Christmas. So I would bring it to her all throughout the year, and she'd be like, "You want to listen to this book? We live in Texas, and it's 90 degrees out."
I mean, like you, that was actually my first, not the book, but the actual Mickey's Christmas Carol, which aired, it would be played around Christmas time on TV, and it scared me to death. I was terrified of it, and for the longest time, most of my memories of A Christmas Carol are wrapped up in that really. The adaptation is quite cute until you get to the very end when you have all those imagery of Scrooge basically going to hell, with fire and which is not in the book. So I had seen that. I'd seen that, and I think I saw Scrooged at a relatively young age too, and so those two
That
were
is the
among the
updating with Bill Murray
Yeah.
in the Scrooge character.
and also fairly terrifying in its in a lot of ways, but in its Ghost of Christmas Is Yet to Come, very disturbing imagery, and so in retrospect, it's kind of shocking that I wanted to read it at all.
Yeah, I remember. I remember the Disney Christmas Carol. A family used to own a video store, and around Christmas time, we would just play that on. I think we had it on Laserdisc, and we would just play it on repeat. And so you just have everybody like that goes to the videos. Like this is a new fancy for the first video store where I grew up in Canton, Georgia. They would just come in and watch it. But I remember there was a Full Moon Entertainment production of it with George C. Scott as Ebenezer Scrooge and Edward Woodward of Equalizer fame as the Ghost of Christmas Present. I really liked that one. It was grim and it felt very cold and all of that. And also I have this really fond memory of a stage production that my high school put on. And I went to go see it, and there's the point where the Ghost of Christmas Future, they're showing up, so they're on this cloak and they're covered and they got like monster hands and everything, and they're walking down the steps. And the actress crashes, just wipes out on the stairs, which really takes away the intimidation factor of the Ghost of Christmas Future. She gets up and does the part, and it was one of those things like when they did the bow, she actually took her little mask off and everything's like, don't do that. We don't need to know who you are. But yeah, there's so many versions. It just feels like something like everybody's gonna update it or try to do a very kind of faithful version at some point down the line. It's just one of those stories that is ubiquitous.
Speaking of multiple versions, I have found it interesting how many rom-coms have been made on this. Just last week, in our house, Christmas starts on November 16th.
Nice.
I'm a Halloween girl, and my husband's a Christmas guy, so we split November in the middle.
Perfect.
So I've started watching Christmas movies, and I put on one called Christmas Cupid. Who was to know that it was going to actually be a rom-com retelling of a PR agent who has lost sight of what Christmas means?
Of course.
I think that seems a common thing in adaptations, that the intended of Ebenezer when he's younger somehow, they end up being together or something.
Yeah.
But that's something that is very like one of the things I love about it is that she just stone cold dumps him and gives him like the most logical, decent, and like, please do something good with your life. I hope you enjoy your life making money, because all you care about is gold. And I love the person that you were, which is just cold. And he just, all right, I'm going to go make a lot of money. I'll see you later.
And I love in the book that she goes on with her life. She marries someone else. She has a small herd of children.
That was one thing I was curious about. Maybe not so much his ex-girlfriend, but one of the flashbacks we get, I think, of his sister bringing him home.
Yeah.
Was that inspired by Dickens's time as a child laborer? Because I didn't hear much explanation of like what was happening to Scrooge during that. He had been sent away, but I didn't know if there was any background context.
There's not. And he sent away to school, which is actually normal for the time period. Is not at all unusual for children to leave home, particularly boys, especially boys, and go to a school, whether it's particularly for like, if you're not of the class that's going to go to Eton and Harrow and places like that. But there were sort of decent schools run by schoolmasters out of their home or out of a large house. And so that's where Scrooge is sent. What's unusual about it, and you see this with, because when he first shows up in that memory, there's all the boys who are on horses and carts, and they're all leaving the school and kind of shouting to each other, and because they're going home for the holidays. But Scrooge is not. Scrooge has not been invited home for the holidays. So he has been sent to school. And the implication when Fan shows up is that their father has sent him away because their father has developed, he's cruel, or I know some adaptations take that, and I think this is probably the most logical explanation, that perhaps the mother died in childbirth, or died as the consequences of childbirth, and so that he can't send away the little girl, but he can get rid of Scrooge. But then I guess he comes to his senses, and Fan comes to take him home when Ebenezer's a little bit older. So, but in fact, nobody really rescued. From what I was reading, nobody really rescued Dickens from the factory. His parents eventually sort of vaguely remembered that maybe he shouldn't be working in a factory anymore once they, even because they were out of prison. But he continued working there for quite a while, and they were like, "Oh wait, maybe you should go back to school." So,
And I think this is historically, the 19th century, the Victorian era was where the notion of childhood kind of began. Like, we shouldn't have 5-year-olds working in factories and things like that.
it took most of the century to get there, but yeah.
I say Appalachian coal mines need to catch up.
They were lagging. They were lacking indicator for sure.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of thinking about this story and what you all found kind of is relevant to it, or how it persists, or just I also think, because this is the original version, this is the OG version, this is the source material, it is kind of weird too, and I'm kind of fascinated by its weirdness. So it's kind of interesting what each of y'all were kind of attracted to in this, or fascinated by.
I think for me it was the depictions of Christmas. As much as I might be a Halloween girl, I do love Christmas as well. And it is just very whimsical. And I think that that's what I liked. I was like, I could definitely see like sitting down and listening to this while I sit in front of a fireplace and it's snowy outside. See, I really like the descriptive like words, and it made me feel warm. And just the wording of it brought that to my mind.
I mean, I've read this book, best guess, 34 times. I'm estimating there. It could be 33, 30. But, so, I mean, obviously this thing keeps bringing me back. But interesting that you said it makes you feel warm, because so much of the beginning stuff is so cold. And what I think in the early sections of the book is a very almost physical reminder of the fact that we're still in what was called the Little Ice Age. And like a lot of our Christmas songs and stories and ideas come out of the Little Ice Age, which didn't end until towards the end of the 19th century. And so it was like a 600-year period called the Little Ice Age, where the climate was messed up.
Krakatoa erupted?
No, Krakatoa didn't seem to. That came at the end of the century.
Okay.
That was 1882 or 8 or something like. It was in the 1880s.
Okay.
And there was an earlier one, Mount Tambora, in the 18-teens, which led to The Year Without a Summer, which led to Frankenstein.
Sure.
But no, it was just like a 600-year period where the climate was essentially colder than it had been before, and so then it's called the Little Ice Age. And so you have like this really, really cold climate that is, I mean, it's still livable. It's not the real Ice Age,
Sure.
but so like how cold it is in Victorian London, and the Scrooge himself being a very cold person.
I really like the descriptions in this section of characters, particularly Bob, having just a little bit of like, there's like a little bit of coal in the heater, and there's a candle, and that he's like putting his hands on the candle as if it's near the candle, as if that's going to keep him warm. And it's so much of like, he has to think himself warm. And there's a part in the night where Scrooge is very cold and he has to think himself warm, which is kind of like the power of imagination.
Except Bob doesn't have it, it says. The Bob not being a man, a very strong imagination, couldn't warm his hands.
But then, I mean, this is an example of like language. You're talking about how warm it is a language in a story that is meant to warm you. Yeah, and it is those first sections being very chilly for so many reasons.
The good news is, right before you freeze to death, you get really warm again.
Right. I mean, Hans Christian Andersen, if you've ever read The Little Match Girl, that's exactly the plot. She then dies.
I was thinking Jack London.
Yeah.
How to Better Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking of Anderson because he and Dickens did know each other, although I don't know if they knew each other at the time they wrote this book. But I said this in my notes, but I never thought of it before until I was reading it this time. But Marley's fate and the fate of the other spirits who are basically like financiers and stuff, that had to roam the earth doing good or unable to do the good they wanted to do that they should have done in their lifetimes. It sort of vaguely echoes Anderson's original Little Mermaid, which was actually published 6 years before, where the Little Mermaid, after she dies, and then she has like this chance to become like a spirit of the air, and she might be able to win herself a soul. And it's very grim. But I do not know if it had been translated. Like I said, I know that some years later Anderson visited Dickens and overstayed his welcome. But there's some very funny stories about what happened, including Anderson crashing out on Dickens's front lawn. But I just thought it was interesting. Then the little match girl, she's literally lighting matches, and she has this vision of like her grandmother's house, and it's all warm and everything, and then you realize that she's dead.
Good times.
Yeah, good times. Gotta love the 19th century. I actually do.
Yeah. But look, I think just this time reading it, I was struck by, this is a town full of pollution.
Oh yeah.
And it is kind of the darkness and the heavy fog it's cold, there's a low pressure front, and there's it is just a nasty, nasty place to be. And so it seems the opposite of that kind of rural space that is kind of the rural country Christmas.
I mean, he talks about sometimes like the coal, like he doesn't like the soot in the air, the blackened fronts of the buildings, after in the 19th century led to like all these buildings used to be different colors, but then they were blackened by the extensive use of coal smoke or coal fire. There's huge fascinating history there.
Not to bring it back to Appalachia again, but that still reminds me of Appalachian coal houses.
It
turning
should.
black from the coal trains. And
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of resonance there.
I mean, I feel like it makes sense to have some sort of Christmas Carol story set in Appalachia. I'm sure someone's done it before. I think that there's some nice parallels. That
the ghosts of the men who worked in the mine come and torment the mine owner.
There's a mine owner's partner that's died, and he's just weighed down by this. So
you paid off the safety engineer.
I think it's Scrooge is our main character. I remember, like in creative writing classes, to be wary of what we call 0 to 100 characters. So characters like, you're terrible, and then you're awesome by the end of the story, and that usually you have there's something that's bad about the person, but they're a little bit redeemable at the end. So this goes from he is like, I hate Christmas, and at one point like is actively saying, I'd like to stab people who love Christmas in the heart with Hollywood, as if they're vampires.
Boil them in their own puddings.
So he's very, very violent to this guy that's like, I keep Christmas in my heart all the year and things like that. So
who is his nephew? That's his nephew that he does that to.
Yeah.
Or says that to.
Yeah.
Nothing like family love.
Fred, good old Fred. So how do y'all kind of see Scrooge as this protagonist? And I think it's for me at least, it's hard. Like it's him and his relationship to the various spirits that he visits. I don't know. Thoughts on Scrooge?
I mean, I do think the time, because the novel's so short. I mean, it's a novella, and the timeline is admittedly quite compressed. It happens in one night or 3 nights, depending on where you're standing in the story. But the argument it seems to be making is that Scrooge, what has happened to Scrooge is that he's forgotten. He's forgotten to be who he used to be. And we see the transition between the young man who is still enjoying Christmas, who works for Fezziwig, and then the man in the prime of his life who has become very greedy. And we're not told how he got there, but it does seem like the fact that the Ghost of Christmas Past takes him back to his childhood, which wasn't a happy childhood, but also isn't a deeply deprived childhood either. Like, he does not allow Scrooge to be like, oh, I was tormented. It's like, yeah, you were neglected, but there's joy in that. Like, that wonderful passage how he's reading and he sees the characters and the characters like come to comfort him. I love that. But he doesn't get the excuse of like, oh, I was sad and abused. Like, no, you just forgot how to be a good person. And so I feel like on that sense, there's this sort of like, he doesn't have as far to go as you might think. It's that he's lost his capacity. It's not that he's evil. It's that he's lost his capacity to care about anything. He's largely, for all of his like, oh, I want to boil people and bury them with a stake of holly in their heart. He's just being grumpy. He's not a nice person at all, but he is not. He's just mean.
His bark is worse than his bite.
I mean, well, he doesn't. I mean, his bite is terrible for people who owe him money, but he's not. I mean, he's not a good person, but he's also he's not like an. He's not out here. He's not killing people, I guess, which is not great. The bar is in hell.
I guess his actions are his inactions. That he's fought, like, this is what the contract said. This is what you owe me.
Yeah.
And if you didn't do it, then you didn't do it. But there's no grace to him.
That's it. He has no grace. He's very legalistic. And even when the at the beginning when the portly gentlemen come and ask for charity donations, he's like, are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Because as far as he's concerned, as long as the institutions to which his taxes or his any of that he's supporting by virtue of being a citizen, as long as those institutions are working, then he owes nothing to anyone else. Like, Scrooge's primarily, his problem is essentially a profound selfishness. He's only interested in protecting himself and living for himself. But it's also, I've also pointed out, he's not enjoying his life. Yeah. He seems like he lacks joy, or he doesn't seem to even like money. And he doesn't like live well off of his money. He lives in these like rooms that belong to Marley, and it sounds like a fairly unpleasant life.
Yeah, it's like he's living upstairs from various businesses.
Yeah.
This is not like ideal real estate, but I guess he can afford it. Or he doesn't have to spend a lot of money on it.
Yeah, I mean, he's rich because he's a penny pincher, but...
See, I always wonder, because Scrooge, at least always in my mind, is older.
Oh, he is.
I'm like, did he keep that joy in his heart long enough to just die that way? Or did somebody make him mad one day on the street and he's like, forget it. I hate you all.
Well, the ending says that he was as good a man as the city ever knew and became a second father to Tiny Tim.
That's true.
I mean, it seems like it's interesting because I've never really thought about in these terms, but yeah, he's often depicted as being almost like, I think of like it's Scrooged, like that particular adaptation, gleefully wicked. Whereas that actually is a level of energy.
Yeah.
That I do. The most energetic thing we do is he like shake a ruler at a kid who's singing a Christmas carol at his door. And I mean, all he does is shake the ruler. He doesn't actually go out there and chase the kid down the street and in fact, that child is one of the first, it's the first person he has compassion for when he starts to remember.
Yeah, he remembers that and feels bad for that kid.
Yeah, he's like, I would have liked to have given him something. That's the first person.
I feel like he's an extreme case of apathy.
Yes. Yeah.
I wish I could say he had compassion fatigue, but that would
No.
include him being compassionate at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah, he's profoundly apathetic and he just exists.
I always have like two opinions of like, okay, so basically his former business partner is and he basically pulls this is like I guess it's an early form of an intervention.
It is literally an intervention.
And also it has some cult conversion vibes, and it lets Okay, so good. I'm gonna get all these people who are gonna talk to you and make you look at the past, present, the future, and think about yourself. So that's good. Like pull that intervention, someone who knows. But then it's like, let's deny him sleep. Let's torment him about his past. Let's see other people joyful, and let's see where he's going to end up without changing. It is a really, it's a lot of psychological torture for.
Well, therapy hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some like you need to like look back at your past and turn over a new and I think a lot of it I think it's interesting because the Ghost of Christmas Future, the Spirit of Christmas doesn't talk, and he does most of the talking where someone would be talking, and so he's kind of like figuring it out himself. Like he's the one determining and how to view things.
I mean, I will say one of the things that gets lost in almost every adaptation of The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is that when Scrooge essentially, at the very, very end of the section, he's trying to force Scrooge to look at the grave. The grave says Ebenezer Scrooge. And he says, am I the man who lay upon the bed? And he clings to the spirit, and he starts, which is an interesting thing, tells us the spirit is corporeal. He clings to the spirit, and he's like, hear me, I'm not the man I was. I will not be the man. Why show me all of this if I am past hope? For the first time, the hand appeared to shake. And then Scrooge makes another plea. And then what the narrator says, the kind hand trembled. So that this spirit who is always portrayed as, if not complete, like he is terrifying, or whatever it is terrifying, but there is actually a kindness to it, that it is there to help you. It wants you to be redeemed, versus, again, like, I actually really like Mickey's Christmas Carol, but my God. I mean, that one is also, and this is often true of Disney in general, but a lot of children's stuff has to strip the nuances from it to make it make sense, to make it legible to children. Also, it's partly because people underestimate children, but like the way that the Cratchits are depicted in that one is like they have like one pea or something.
Yeah.
The turkey's like this big.
Like a hen or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I remember there was an Alliance Theater production I saw in the 90s in Atlanta, and the Ghost of Christmas was just a huge 20-foot tall puppet that was a skeleton.
Nice.
So it was like, it's a scary skeleton, but it's also kind of cute. And it would come out when it gave a bow. It came out and gave a bow.
Aww.
It was really cool kind of effect. But yeah, I mean, I feel like he's just there to he's just almost literally pointing the way to what he should see and what he should recognize about himself.
And I will say, in fairness to the other two spirits, like, they do wake him up in the middle of the night. But there is the only one who I would argue who really kind of becomes torturous to him is the past, because he begs the past, and Scrooge actually then takes violent action against the spirit. But the Ghost of Christmas Present is, I mean, he's just like, let's party, man. I mean, he takes him to all these places. He can't be seen, but he even like lets him stay at a party longer. And
well, I think it's interesting that I think time bends in that section, because he takes him like, he goes and sees the Cratchits. He goes to see Fred. He's going to all these small places. He goes to a lighthouse. So it runs all the way to 12th night. Yeah. So that's January 6th, right?
Yeah. Epiphany.
So they're having,
January 5th is 12th night. January 6th is Epiphany.
Yeah. So how many days how much are they experiencing this wealth of holiday celebration and joy, and just kind of overwhelmed by these things?
He literally says that, like, the spirits need to be able to compress all the Christmas holidays. I mean, and of course the spirits, it happens 3 nights in a row, except of course that it all happens over the course of one night, even though it happens at 1 a.m. twice and then at midnight. So it's magic. We probably do need to talk about the food, though, because I think
we're jumping around on our ghosts, but yeah, what about the Ghost of Christmas Present and all that food?
I mean, it is like you said. You said it's practically food porn. It's something like there's such a, and it's not just though. It's also in earlier sections, like the description of the shops, and the Spanish onions and the fish, everything. Like there's just so much richness to the food. The goose that the Cratchits eat. I've never had goose in my life, but I want to eat that goose. Um, and and I said this in my notes, but it's worth. I had not really thought about it in these terms until I was reading it for this, but the book's from 1843. This is during what's called the Hungry 40s. And we're not to the worst yet. That's still coming. But the Hungry 40s there were a lot of food shortages in Britain, inspired in part by certain laws. And so it was harder for people to access food. So a lot of people were going hungry. And this is directly implicated in the Irish famine, the Great Hunger of 1845 and 6 that killed a third of Ireland. But because the food was going to England. That's why.
They grew plenty of potatoes.
Right, and then the potatoes rotted, and then the potatoes rotted because of the blight, and then a third of the population starved. But there's like the opulence and the wealth of food may in part be part of the fantasy, like to have this level of choice and variety available to you. Certainly with the Ghost of Christmas Present, when he shows up on his throne of Christmas meat.
Yeah, it was a film in the 1930s. I can't remember. It had Douglas Fairbanks Jr. in it, but there's this scene in the opening where he's in a diner, and it just shows the receipt. He spent like $10 if he had like a steak and a salad and a potato and a couple cups of coffee. And it literally was like the audience reaction was mouth water. I want to have just where I can have just a big meal where I feel full. And yeah, we see that, this is, I mean, it goes on for a bit. And yeah, you're kind of like, I'm a little hungry after seeing that passage, reading that passage.
And I think this is our second book in a row of this season that's been full of food porn. Our last one was about food detectives in Japan.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's pure food porn. But this is a passage of food porn, in it. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the passage with the shops is a little bit less, because it's not quite as, mouth-watering food. But there is still some, the grapes and the nuts. Actually, for me, it's always that scene, the shops and the description of all the food in the shops and people being, merry as they buy their last-minute groceries.
There's a part of the scene with the Ghost of Christmas Future comes in, where all his stuff is. There's a line and it was greasy offal. In this place, it was greasy offal, and just oh, that is the opposite of what I want to have. This is this junk and bounty of undesirable things. Is a kind of contrast to that.
Although that is how people made their living, right?
Yeah.
He's a rag and bone man, so the rags are repurposed, and then waste from food, animal waste is then repurposed in other ways for tallow, for all kinds of. I mean, it's gross, but you could also make an argument that it is less wasteful than.
It's putting something to use.
Right.
So.
I mean, yeah, and it's great. I actually have always loved that scene, and I think off the top of my head, the only adaptation I know that usually does it is the Patrick Stewart one from the 90s, which is actually my favorite adaptation. But you have that whole scene play out where the laundress and the charwoman and the Undertaker's man come and having robbed the dead Scrooge blind.
Have you all seen those fork and film situations where they show you a movie and they bring out dishes and you eat what you see on the screen?
No, that sounds amazing.
I know they've done it with Ratatouille.
Oh my God.
I've seen them do it with Twilight even. And I think this would be a great Christmas movie to
that
do
would
that
be incredible.
with.
Yeah, they should do it. I mean, I was immediately thinking they should do it with the menu, and then I was like, maybe not. Although that hamburger.
Yeah. So, other thoughts about the ghosts? I think they're the real stars of the show. They're the real highlights, and I think I think one thing to keep in mind: any sort of film or TV adaptation, you should not have a shy retiring actor play any of the Ghost or Scrooge. They have to go. They have to go big. It's kind of like another famous The Muppets Christmas Carol, which is another great one. Is that Michael Caine had said, "I'm going to take this role completely seriously. I am with my fellow actors." And he just plays it really seriously, and that really works with it because he's going to play Scrooge. And it was really one of the few happy times in the '90s for Michael Caine performances. He had kind of come back in the late '90s, but I think that you can't be a subtle actor and do these kind of performances.
Well, Dickens is not a subtle writer.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just not what he like. You could say a lot about him. I mean, this is a man who can write like a page-long sentence. And so yeah, there's just and for that matter, the Victorians also not noted for their subtlety. So there's I think you do need that kind of over the top. I mean, like there is a meme that goes around about the Muppet Christmas Carol comparing Michael Caine's performance in that to Tim Curry in Treasure Island, and the difference is that Tim Curry acts like he's a Muppet, and Michael Caine acts like the Muppets are actors. I mean, I do like, I don't know, for me, the ghosts are there, but to me they're almost more like the vehicles for the rest of the story, because I'm always more interested in like the parts of the story where I really like the Cratchits. I'm fascinated by the scenes we get with the Cratchits. Fred interests me, but like those moments where we get to see other people's lives, especially because Scrooge's life is so kind of cold and empty and sad. Like here's people actually living their lives. And I said I do like the Cratchits a lot, and I like the kind of not just like the family, like the way that they love each other and are happy to be together, but just even things like even when Tiny Tim dies, the way that they take comfort in each other. I don't know.
I think maybe for me that was the warming.
Yes, it
part.
is.
Or even just like the two lighthouse workers who are just alone, but they're still happy to be together. Like
I love that part. Yeah. I mean, like I said, with adaptations, they always get the Cratchits wrong. I mean, they don't get them wrong, but they get there's the desire to exaggerate their poverty, because the Cratchits are not, by Victorian standards, they're poor. I mean, they're certainly not comfortable, but they are also not Victorian working class poor. Like that is a whole other level. These are, as best I can tell, it's hard to see for sure, but Mrs. Cratchit appears to not work outside of the home. Now, they don't appear to have a maid, but the younger children are apparently still in school. They're looking for an apprenticeship for Peter, so he's not in the factories already. Martha is also in an apprenticeship, so these are not like, they're being apprenticed to lower middle class kinds of jobs. As a clerk, Bob is in a lower middle class job, and he would be better off if Scrooge paid better. I mean, the big part of their biggest problem, aside from the fact that they have like 7 kids, is that he works for somebody who, was it 7 kids? 6. 6 kids. Is that he works for somebody who doesn't pay him his worth. So.
And it was kind of like obviously rereading it, and again, this is a work of its time, but the ways in which it is kind of still relevant to us. Everyone's thoughts about that.
I went and bookmarked the part that one of the parts that stands out to me, at the end of the Christmas present section when the children appear. From the foldings of its robe, it brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its garment. "Oh, man, look here, look down here," exclaimed the ghost. They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate too in their humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tints, a stale and shriveled hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. And I'm going to skip a little bit. Having them shown to him in this way, Scrooge tried to say they were fine children, but the words choked themselves rather than be parties to a lie of such enormous magnitude. Spirit, are they yours? Scrooge could say no more. They are man's, said the spirit, looking down upon them, and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. The boy is ignorance, the girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree, but most of all beware the boy. For on his brow I see that which written is doom, that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Deny it, slander all those who tell ye, admit it for your factious purposes, and make it worse, and bide the end. And then Scrooge says, have they no refuge or resource? And the spirit turns Scrooge's words back on him. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? But this, it's one of the few moments in the text where Dickens makes it very clear that for all of the physical deprivations that people are suffering, ignorance is the real threat to society.
I feel like that traditionally it was written as a warning for rich people. But I feel like our rich people today would take this and go, see, our lives are hard. Be happy with what you have.
Right. I mean, I also was thinking about, this could be, the message of the book could be skewed as, because the workhouses and the poor law, the treadmill, these are all things that are state-sponsored. But they're... and so the rich don't have to do anything, right? I mean, the book is then like, oh no, the rich do need to do something, which then that leads to an argument about private charity, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, it should just be private charity. But in fact, the punitive measure, like the poor law, the treadmill, the workhouses, these are punitive measures. They're not actually rehabilitative measures, or they're not really helping. And so I think Dickens would be, he did advocate for social change as well as just open up your pockets.
I feel like if our world's richest man today had a Christmas Carol experience, he would just think he fell down the K-hole again.
Yeah, I mean, Scrooge is a character that I guess the vast majority of audience, it's somebody you hold at arm's length, that you are not as without joy and without care as he is. So we get to watch this person change for the better. And that's good, but I was like, who are the actual people who are the Scrooges in the world? Do they look at that? Do they see this as, oh, that person's terrible? Is this a story that's here to comfort the working and middle classes that perhaps one day, if magical intervention, rich, thoughtless people might be a little better?
Yeah. Dickens was beloved, but his audience would have largely been middle class. I mean, Scrooge is also middle class. He's rich, but he's not aristocracy. But yeah, I mean, he's not writing this to the people who could really make change.
Yeah. And I think too also that we think about Dickens as like high literature now.
He wasn't then.
He was a popular writer that wrote. He was writing to make money.
Absolutely.
I'll use a very, very recent. It puts me of mind of Patrick Morrissey recently being like, I'll match your donations. Then why don't you just donate?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like this book, Patrick Morrissey doing that was Dickens writing to the middle class.
I mean, I will say he did put his money where he could. He didn't have a lot of money at the time he wrote this book. But yeah, there's also a sense to which Scrooge ultimately changes or remembers himself in large part because he's terrified of dying alone. Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, he's already begun to change by the time the spirit shows him what is likely to happen to him. But there is this element of it isn't purely altruistic.
It's still self-serving.
It is still self-serving. But then again, he still does change. He still does become better. And to his credit, the first thing he does this is a total, I'm going to say this is a total dude thing. Like, or that maybe not just a dude thing. This is a person who does not have to prepare his own meals.
Mhm.
He does send a giant turkey to Bob Cratchit's house, which is awesome. However, I feel very certain that Mrs. Cratchit was absolutely not prepared to deal with a turkey the size of Tiny Tim on Christmas morning when she has a goose, and so now she has this whole other bird she has to deal with.
Is her oven even big enough?
Yeah.
Oh, she doesn't have an oven. This is a very minor detail, and it's taken me years to understand it. But when they're the spirit is like taking the plates off of people and like sprinkling it with his own. So this is because there are bakehouses, and a lot of Londoners do not have houses or apartments big enough to have an oven, and so they take their meals to these bakehouses. Often it would be a baker, and they would have the oven would be available after a certain hour, and you would cook your food in these bakehouses. And so there's a bit when the goose is when they're getting ready for dinner. Let's see, Master Peter and the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, which they soon returned in high procession. So there's it's not clear that they literally go out of the house to get the goose. Now they have a stove, they have a fireplace, and so that's where the potatoes, the pudding is cooked in a kettle in the back because they're boiled. So I made a plum pudding about 13 years ago, and it's a boiled thing.
Yeah. It was the whole thing about going back to the Ghost of Christmas Present, repeating things back. It feels like when somebody says something terrible, they're we've got evidence of you saying something awful that should have got you canceled a long time ago. Yeah. There's all these little things. It's one of these things whenever. I see students write, we're still dealing with some film or something. We're still dealing with these problems. Yes, it's sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that it takes on this kind of poignancy about what could be, and people being happy and people being decent, just not being crappy to each other, and the people in power that they just a little more generous. Things could be a lot, but people could eat. People who are ill could get the care that they need. And it's just not that.
Has it ever been said or theorized what Tiny Tim has that is curable? But
so many theories. One of them is often rickets. Although the iron frame suggests that there might be something wrong with his spine. Honestly, it could be that he has some kind of congenital, some sort of thing that he's born with. But that will also weaken his immune system, which means he may just die.
Yeah.
And the fact is, it's 1843, right? The fact that the Cratchits have 6 living children is practically a miracle in its own right. We do not know how many children they had otherwise, but a significant number of children don't make it out of childhood.
That's why they had huge families.
I mean, in part, and also the whole there's no real birth control.
There is a method.
Dickens had 10 children, and I know one of them, I don't know if they all made it out of childhood or not, but and there was supposedly with his mistress, there's some evidence, including testimony from his children, that there may have been a child there who did not make it. So, yeah. But yeah, Tiny Tim, he doesn't die most likely because he gets better nutrition.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's probably the thing. And rickets is that's one of the theories that's primarily caused by poor nutrition.
So any last thoughts about this? I mean, I think it's one of those wonderful books. It's again something you should read before you die. Go back to the source material and enjoy. I feel like anybody's Christmas viewing is going to take in some sort of Christmas Carol adaptation.
Oh, yeah.
But also, read the book. It's short. It's under 100 pages in most editions. So
I listened to Patrick Stewart read the book
in
the audiobook, and it was very well done. It was very fun.
I'd say I always liked the bossy narrator. I do like the narrator is very like the narrator's narrating, and it's the narrator's full of opinions and thoughts.
They're
And
an intrusive narrator.
yeah, yeah, the bossy. I always liked that. We don't see that as much anymore, but I hope maybe at some point in the future, our contemporary literature will get back to some more bossy, self-righteous narrators.
I like to think the narrator is like the boss's ghost or the ghost boss.
I like the narrator until I don't,
Mhm.
because there's one passage that I really dislike the narrator in because I find it profoundly creepy.
Yeah. You were right about that.
Yeah, when he talks about wanting to what is it, have the
It's the-
lightest license of a child but be man enough to appreciate it with Belle's daughter. And that's just gross. And it gets, I swear, I read this book every year, it gets grosser every year. Otherwise, how, and it's in that same chapter, I think, that the narrator mentions that he's standing in spirit at your elbow. I actually like that part. So, yeah, the narrator, the intrusive narrator, which isn't unusual in this period,
Yeah.
but it does feel, I think it adds to the kind of coziness of the story in
Yeah.
some ways. And the Christmas ghost story is a tradition in Britain. So, like, the idea that he's there telling us this story, and Dickens literally did do, like, readings of this for years afterward.
I think we need to bring back Christmas ghost stories.
I guess they must have never, I don't know if they ever caught on in the United States, but it's really a pity.
It is a shame.
He has a number of other stories too, other Christmas stories, which I confess to not having read, but one of them is called The Haunted Man, the story of the goblins who stole the Sexton.
Cool.
It's called The Haunted Man and the Ghost's Bargain.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's also The Chimes, which I have not read.
Right. Well, thank you both for your insights and thoughts here. And again, HerdCon, make sure HerdCon Book Chats, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. And this will be the last one, last episode for 2025 that will be recorded. But we'll be back in 2026 talking about more wonderful short books and stimulating discussion about it. Thank you.